timekeeper. You ready?
The moment you said your first word, the clock started.
This is the last time too. Okay. The topic under discussion tonight reminds me of the story about the national politician who campaigned on a party platform promoting the welfare state. His stump speech was filled with promises of all the government services that he would fight for if the voters would just elect him to Congress. He promised to meet all of the people's needs relating to child care, education, nutrition, housing, transportation, health care, pensions, and good paying jobs for every citizen. Finally, at one town hall meeting, a boy raised his hand and asked, "Why would we need jobs?" Yes, just as when we were children, everybody wants to ride in the wagon, but nobody wants to pull the wagon. It's a principle which is so simple that even a child can understand. I would like to set the stage for tonight's discussion by talking a bit about the political spectrum. The left-right political spectrum is a common way of classifying political positions, political ideologies, and political parties. The general consensus seems to be that as one moves from the center to the left, the political spectrum is occupied by Democrats, liberals, progressives, socialists, and communists. And as one moves from the center to the right, one encounters Republicans, conservatives, libertarians, fascists, and Nazis. However, when one ponders the situation a bit, it becomes apparent that much of this placement has nothing to do with the true relationship among the political beliefs. As with other spectrums, the political spectrum must be measured from one extreme to the other. One way to do this is by constructing a horizontal line with no government or anarchy on the extreme right, and total government or totalitarianism on the extreme left. Totalitarian systems include fascism, Nazism, communism, and socialism. The extreme on the right, anarchy, where no government prevails, historically has resulted in totalitarians rushing in to fill the vacuum. Because the leap from no government on the extreme right to total government on the extreme left has been shown to be so easy to make, the political spectrum might best be portrayed as a horseshoe, so that the extremes are close together and the system of limited self-government is furthest from both. In either case, line or horseshoe, the traditional American position of a limited federal government, a free market, and private property bears no relationship to the systems of the left. Nazism, fascism, communism, and socialism all share a common belief in government control of one type or another, with more and more government finance programs leading to government regulation of every facet of life. From this understanding, we can see that the basic issue is between two principles. The first being individualism, and the second being collectivism. Individualism holds that human beings have inalienable rights to life, liberty, property, and the pursuit of happiness. That only on the basis of these rights can people have a society of freedom and justice, and that governments are instituted to secure those rights. Sound familiar? I suppose that we could call it Americanism, because the United States of America is an example of a social system based on the principle of individualism, or at least it was originally set up that way, except for the institution of slavery in the southern states, of course, which was later done away with. Collectivism, on the other hand, holds that human beings do not have such rights, and any rights that they do have are granted by the state. Each person exists not for his own sake, but for the sake of the group. That raises the obvious question in view of tonight's discussion. Where does the welfare state fit into that scheme? To answer that, we must first define what the welfare state is. Strictly speaking, a welfare state is a government that completely provides for the welfare or the well-being of its citizens. Such a government is involved in Such a government is involved in citizens' lives at every level. It provides for physical, material, and social needs, rather than the people providing for their own needs. The purpose of the welfare state is to create economic equality, or to assure equitable standards of living for all. It redistributes wealth by heavily taxing the middle and upper classes, in order to provide goods and services for those seen as underprivileged. The redistribution of wealth is a socialist concept, from each according to his ability, to each according to his need. But try to imagine an involuntary transfer of income or wealth from one person to another, which is not a violation of the right to property, the right to keep the fruits of one's labor. Hence, the welfare state is the antithesis of personal liberty, which is why the U.S. Constitution grants no such power of wealth distribution to the federal government. But some may argue that the welfare state is not incompatible with Americanism, because the U.S. Constitution authorizes the federal government to address the issue of the general welfare. Indeed, the preamble to the U.S. Constitution states that the Constitution is ordained and established to, among other things, promote the general welfare. But one must first understand what the framers of the Constitution meant by the general welfare. At the time of the Constitution, at the time it was written, the general welfare referred to the welfare of all of the citizens, and not to certain entitled groups. Secondly, one must also understand how the Constitution promotes the general welfare. It does so by severely limiting the powers of the federal government. After all, the United States of America did not become the most successful political, economic, and social experiment in the history of the human race because of what the federal government did. It became the freest, richest, and most powerful nation in the world because of what the federal government was prevented from doing. As Patrick Henry put it, the Constitution is not an instrument for the government to restrain the people. It is an instrument for the people to restrain the government, lest it come to dominate our lives and interests. And then there is Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution, which empowers the Congress to provide for the common defense and the general welfare of the United States. Some argue that the semicolon after the words United States implies that this phrase stands alone on an equal footing with the so-called enumerated powers which follow it, and that this means that Congress can pass any laws it deems necessary and proper in order to provide for the general welfare. Again, we must keep in mind that the expression general welfare refers to the welfare of everyone, and not just to certain designated people. Secondly, we must keep in mind what James Madison said in the Federalist Papers about Article 1, Section 8.